Hello, everyone. I'm Carlos Carniceru Uraballen, editor of Future is Blue, a weekly newsletter promoted by Funcas Europe and Agenda Pública. And today I'm joined by four great experts that they know so much about green policies, and that's what we're going to cover today. Maria Mendiluce is CEO of Women Business and Managing Director, Climate and Energy at World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Jos Delbecq is professor at European University Institute and former Director General at EU Climate Action. Maria Sicilia, she is Director of Strategy at Enagas, a Spanish energy company that is accredited as an independent TSO by the European Union and carries out its activities in 8 countries. And last but not least, Sonia de Gregorio Hurtado. She's a lecturer on urbanism and land planning at the Universidad Politécnica in Madrid. So thank you all for joining us. And considering your level of expertise on sustainability and green policies, the first question I want to ask you is about the Green Deal. The Green Deal was presented just the COVID-19 crisis, and the level of ambition of the EU was remarkable. So I'm wondering whether how the COVID-19, considering the huge economic impact that it's going to have on European economies, how is this going to affect on the Green Deal? So Maria Mendiluce, maybe you can start sharing your views on that.
Sure. So I think, yeah, this crisis, of course, some might see this as an opportunity for the Green Deal to be strengthened, and others might see it as a threat to the Green Deal. I do see it as an opportunity. I think this crisis have shown us the exponential nature of systemic risks. And we know that climate change is a big systemic risk that, if untapped, can have enormous consequences on people, the economies, and the planet. So in some ways, I see that COVID is a wake-up call for many people that have changed the way that they act, they behave, and they live. And it provides an opportunity for them to see that they can live in a different way. I think the Green Deal must build back better. So it must ensure that we build resilience, that we have resilient businesses, resilient people, and a resilient economy in Europe. I also have high hopes that it does so, and that it provides also a pathway for other countries to follow. Because I don't think there is a choice. I think the Green Deal is more important than ever, and we only can do, as governments, as business, we have the responsibility to do it better, because we have seen that, that the way that we have done it until now is not that great.
Jos, do you share Maria's optimism? This is an opportunity. This is a wake-up call.
Well, I fully share that view. It's more an opportunity than a threat, but there is going to be some challenge and some debate at the political level. Let's face up to reality. I think it's very encouraging that Commission President von der Leyen and Vice President Frans Timmermans have confirmed that the Green Deal is going to be a full and complete part of any policies that are going to be developed to fight the COVID-19 virus. And I think that's very heartening. However, there's going to be debate. And where I see perhaps a debate shifting, and that is where I see the opportunity, is that the emphasis is going to be more on measures, on investments that need to be done in the energy transition and energy efficiency and renewables and grids, in the transport system, etc., etc. So more on measures and investments, while the debate on the future targets may be not facilitated by the present COVID crisis. We know the climate law is on the table. In September, the impact assessment is going to be put on the table. I foresee quite a long debate on setting new targets, but that does not diminish the opportunity of investing a lot on sustainable investments, on innovation, on the jobs and the changes that we need for the future.
Maria, what's your view on the impact of this crisis on the Green Deal?
Well, I agree that every crisis opens opportunities to change things, and the Green Deal, the European Green Deal, as it was conceived, in my view, it is going to be a disruptive plan for the economy and the social structures of Europe. So this crisis represents an opportunity in this sense. However, there will be challenges. I fully agree there will be challenges because, first of all, the very low price of oil and of other conventional fuels will make more difficult for some European countries to leapfrogging from coal-based economies to renewable-based economies. It will be more costly in this sense. Weak demand for energy, for all kinds of energy, but for electricity, means lower electricity prices that can endanger the profitability of some renewable investments. CO2 price, this is working quite well, but demand for CO2 emission allowances is also low. So in the short term can also need some reinforcement for this low carbon investment. And last but not least, there will be more pressure on public budgets right now because of the social and health consequences of the crisis. However, the opportunity is clear. As the International Energy Agency says, 70% or 3/4 of energy investments today are driven by government policy. So it is in the realm of governments to make the stimulus packages a great opportunity for the energy transition.
Thank you, Maria. Sonia, what's your take on this?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the invitation. Very happy to join this conversation. And with regard to your question, I think that the need to give a specific and urgent response to this crisis cannot be an excuse to relax or to even replace the objectives of the Green Deal. For me, the response to the crisis need to take into account persisting social and environmental problems that were there before the crisis, that have been set as specific objectives of the European Union policies, and that are even more relevant and more urgent today. For example, I am thinking about the exacerbation of poverty in cities, particularly in disadvantaged neighborhoods in which the Green Deal could support a green transition. And also I am thinking about the climate emergency and the European Union commitment to become the first carbon neutral continent by 2050. This, along with many other challenges that we had ahead. So from my view, the response that the European Union will give to the crisis can be an opportunity to integrate all these challenges in a strategically manner and in a sound financial instrument that needs to be capable to maintain and even reinforce and also take advantage from the objectives of the Green Deal.
Thank you, Sonia. I think some of you mentioned that this is going to cost maybe even more considering COVID-19 and considering the prices of traditional energies. So one of the promises of the Commission when the Green Deal was presented was not to leave anyone behind. And I wonder how this idea plays and is connected to the recovery fund that the Commission will present in a few weeks, that is supposed to help the economies to survive and to cope, help them survive in the best condition this huge crisis. So maybe you can connect these ideas of the recovery fund helping economies out of this crisis and not leaving anyone behind in the transition to greener economies. Maria Mendiluce, would you like to start on this one? Sorry, Maria, we can't hear you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Maybe I let Josh maybe start with this, and then I'll comment afterwards if you don't mind.
Josh.
Well, we don't know the details yet of the recovery fund, but I would see that it has to be linked to the needs and not to the old criteria. So, but the point I wanted to make, apart from the recovery fund, is that indeed there is going to be pressure on public budgets. And one of the main dossiers on the table that is going to go ahead as planned is the review of the Energy Tax Directive. And I think in what just has been said, prices of oil and electricity are historically low. So that's a challenge to be dealt with. But seen from a climate perspective, we have to have the prices right. And so this is perhaps an opportunity not only to look at carbon pricing, but also as a review of the Energy Tax Directive that should help the targets that have been set on energy efficiency, on renewables, and in particular, removing many exceptions and exemptions that are there. They are fairly generous, not only for transport fuels, say on aviation, but also in the energy field. There are so many exemptions that could be addressed now. And at the same time, it would allow to generate some public revenues, because as rightly was said, there is some pressure on public budgets, and so fresh governmental revenue is going to be needed. So we are all used to the price levels in the energy sector of the past. So let's make a smooth correction so as to make sure that the Energy Tax Directive responds to the new reality, and that we are not undermining the positive mood in the energy transition, but rather reinforcing that. The Energy Tax Directive and the ETS are two opportunities to get the prices right, and we should not miss those opportunities.
Maria, would you like to react to that?
Yes, Maria Mendiluce or Cecilia?
You can start now that you started.
Thank you. No, I think Josh is right. Listen, I think from a business perspective, there's two things that are important. I think there is the money that is going to bail out some companies. And so we believe that money should come with some conditions. So companies that are going to be bailed out, they need to ensure that public money, it's also invested in activities that will prevent future crises. So we think that those companies need to have a commitments to be net zero by 2050. Those companies need to integrate the risks that they are having into their financial reports, and the money that is going to those companies needs to produce jobs and be productive, no? So that we create new jobs, because that's the biggest problem that we have. Then when it comes to the expenditures that the recovery fund will have, and as you rightly said, not leaving people behind. I think, so while there might be some hesitation around targets, I think we need to double down efforts by countries to be aligned with net zero. We cannot go behind. So there's like around 200 companies or more that have already set science-based targets and net zero targets. This is resonating very well with business. So it would be really surprising for business to see that now countries are going behind and say, no, we are afraid. No, I mean, that's not the right signal to send to companies. The second thing is that money should invest in technology, in clean technologies that produce jobs. There's great work done by the International Energy Agency. And so this is the moment to invest in retrofitting buildings, which will reduce emissions in the long term and create lots of jobs. It's the moment to invest on renewable energy and infrastructure that supports it. It's the moment to invest in the electrification of transport. Because let's face it, the money that these governments are going to spend, the trillions of dollars or euros that is going to be spent, is going to be spent in the next year. And then we won't see any more money coming because the deficits of the country is going to be enormous. So we better invest very smartly, and we should invest this money with a long-term view, not a short-term view on, oh, I'm struggling right now, I might not be able to have good targets. No. I mean, we just need to elevate ourselves and think, okay, this is the money of the decade. Well, let's invest it where it can be most productive for the planet, for the people, and for the emissions.
Cecilia, do you want to react to that? I'm using your name now, so there's no confusion here.
Yes, because one aspect that we need to be very careful when designing these recovery packages is, as you rightly mentioned, Carlos, is not to leave anyone behind. And we know from experience that when the burden is there, but the most vulnerable and the less wealthy in society, there is always a reaction. And this has to be taken into account, because we know that carbon pricing and incentives to retrofitting in buildings or for changing vehicles sometimes can benefit the most wealthy in society. If we don't align the objectives, the long-term objectives, with short-term social and distributional impacts of the measures, we will risk having a reaction. So yes, to carbon pricing, to get the prices right, but combining supply side measures with demand side incentives and subsidies for the less wealthy that cannot afford the upfront investments in new equipment, and more efficient equipment, in investing with lower energy bills. Their investments in insulation and retrofitting is less profitable. So there should be a very careful balance, the two sides of the equation, providing supply side incentives, mainly in the form of price signals, grants, loans on the financing, ensuring the bankability of projects, and combining with demand side measures, taking into account the potentially regressive impact and distributional effects of these measures.
Sonia, would you like to react to that?
My view maybe would be a little different because of my the area in which I work and develop my research. For me, with regard to the recovery fund, two key elements are cities and towns. And this is because, as we all know, the response to the pandemic needs to be faced counting on cities, because they are at the very core of the pandemic. But also, we need to recall that along the last decade, cities have been pointed out by international bodies, but also by the European Union, as crucial to face one of the most important challenges of Europe. And thus, it makes a lot of sense from my point of view to focus a part of the financial resources of the recovery fund on cities. For example, they are crucial to make the ecological transition that is very related with the Green Deal, and to make it in a just manner. And this is because in cities, we know that concentrate problems of different kinds, social, environmental, and also economic. For example, in this regard, we know that they are responsible for around 70% of CO2 emissions, that they are among the most vulnerable places to climate change, and also that in cities concentrate social exclusion and urban poverty. So for this, for also many other reasons, we have a lot of knowledge about sustainable urban development in the European Union that has been developed within cohesion policy for during years. investing in cities and support cities in doing a fair ecological transition through the recovery fund, for me, has a high potential to boost local economies through place-based projects that focus on those areas and sector where the funding is more needed and can deliver more added value, making at the same time advancing knowledge and experience in the European Union, and of course in the cities that will be implementing, for example, to reduce carbon emission by fostering the use of clean energy in residential buildings, for example, or also to adapting the public space to climate change in cities, or to regenerating the most disadvantaged neighborhoods from a regenerating approach, so that the whole level of resilience of the city is improved. So if I can, if I have time, with regard cities, I will also add two other issues. Cities have a lot of experience in dealing and managing European Union projects, so they have administrative capacity to deal with the actions that will to implement the actions of the recovery fund, these potential actions. And also it's very important to keep in mind that they have a very accurate diagnosis of the reality, their territorial, social reality, and also the most important pressing climate vulnerabilities. So they can identify rapidly where, under specific conditions, the recovery fund can be more beneficial. And because all this, they can also deliver the rapid and effective action that is needed, and an action that can be, from my point of view, fully aligned with the Green Deal.
Thank you, Sonia. Maybe I want to ask you a final question, and I will try to drive some more optimism towards seeing the opportunities of this crisis to seeing greener economies. And I wonder whether, because of course we need cities on board, we need businesses on board, that already so many of them committed, but in the end we need people on board and to believe that the benefits are worth it. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering whether, now that we are all in lockdown, but hopefully soon coming more and more out to the streets again, but we're seeing the benefits of reducing our activity. We're seeing really blue skies, we're seeing pollution coming down in so many cities. So I wonder whether this is going to be, you know, this is going to bring in some more social support for changes that are needed to ensure a green recovery. Anyone would like to react to that?
Well, I think one of the things, there are lots of news, but one that really struck me is one that said that during this COVID crisis, we have prevented, the crisis has prevented 11,000 deaths because of the pollution. So I find that it's kind of an extraordinary figure. I wish, we didn't have the coronavirus. Of course, this is the worst pandemic we have probably going to see in our lifetime. But I think people need to be aware that the way that we were living before is not sustainable and is not healthy. And so I would hope, that people can come back to more healthy lifestyles. That will mean maybe working more from home when that's possible, using less transport, replacing long trips with Zoom calls that unite us, etc. So there is a lesson for society to also learn from this crisis. Now, it is the responsibility probably to those that speak more to people, which I believe is governments now, and then business, no, to make sure that message gets through to the people, and so that we don't go back to the old manners.
Thanks, Maria. Any others, a final word on this idea?
Well, I think that the COVID crisis is going to help, that's for sure. But at the same time, we have to face up to the reality that the memories of the man in the street may be short-lived. And I think there is going to be a tendency to come back to the old habits. So that is why I fully agree with what was said. We have to seize the opportunity of driving the investments to those where the green output is the biggest. And I heard a lot of suggestions on the cities, on the infrastructure, on the buildings. I think that's a very good way to go. I would add as well, let's take the opportunity to have the pricing right. Because the 2050 The carbon neutrality is an objective, a long-term objective, and there is a lot of innovation that is maturing in the companies, and it should be nurtured. It should not be stopped. It should continue. It should be even facilitated and go quicker. And so having those prices and investments right for the future, I think is the fantastic opportunity that we should grab after this major disaster that hopefully is going to be for once in a lifetime, as Maria was saying.
Thank you, Josh. Maria, do you want to have a final word?
Just a note on the relationship between economic activity and in consumption. Now we are seeing clearly that there is a drop in emissions and in fossil fuels consumption because of the slowdown in economic activity. The big question mark is whether we can sustain continuous growth for decades and still do not increase our consumption of resources. That's the key challenge.
Good idea. I take note on that one. It's indeed a challenge. Sonia, would you like a last word before we close?
Yeah, I think that, as you said, cleaner air, but also I come back to cities, and we are in the situation we are living. We are discovering many of us, many European citizens, the city of proximity, the relevance of having everything near to every, not only commerce, also public services and facilities and health services for the elderly and so on. And we are discovering that this cleaner air can be joined with better quality of life, because we don't need to travel very far every day in our daily life. So I think that this can make reflect the European society with regard our daily dynamic, and also the impact that it has on the environment, of course. And from there, I think that maybe we will request to European Union institutions to give to strengthen this big response, this big green response to also to the corona crisis.
Okay, thank you, Sonia. I want to thank you all. I think this was, we didn't have more time, but I think we touched on a lot of angles that are relevant for a green recovery. And I want to thank you all. And I will, of course, share this video with all our readers of Future is Blue, and with you, of course. And let's keep in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Gracias.